Hello, this is to the students of Marketing 606, our fall semester class, which starts on October 22nd. And with me is my friend, our guest, our client, and friend of Dominican University, I might say too.
Happy to be so, yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Today we're going to talk about your product, and that is Chicago Public Square. And I've got a set of questions to ask you about Chicago Public Square.
And with luck, I'll have a set of answers.
And we'll see if they're compatible, if they match up. They can just be random questions and non-matching answers. But we want to know more about this product and really how we as a class of a group of MBA students can help you with marketing the product. So can you tell us about Chicago Public Square?
I can. You know, for many years as a journalist and as a teacher and as a consultant, I've told people, if you're at a point in your career, whether you're a student who just graduated and is looking for work, or whether you're a pro who is between jobs and trying to figure out what's next, and not just in journalism, but really in any field, that the thing to do is start a blog, a website. And make that blog a repository of your best thinking on whatever it is that you want to do. That the blog kind of becomes you imagining, pretending, acting as if you have the job you want. You want to be a sportscaster? Start a blog and provide commentary on games you watch on TV, or go to your local high school game. Record it on video. Share the video. You know, you can post it to YouTube and embed it on your blog. And it becomes a living portfolio of what it is that you think you're good at and what it is you'd like to be better at, because the best way to get better at something is to do it again and again and again.
For sure.
So about almost 2 years ago, I found myself at a point where I had some time on my hands. As you may know, I'm working part-time with a startup that launched almost 6 years ago now, 5.5 years ago. Rivet Radio, which is another whole show in itself. But you know, we agreed that I wasn't needed on a day-to-day basis. I'm still an employee. I spent some time there, but I had some time on my hands, coinciding with the time when Donald Trump ascended to the presidency.
Right.
And as you may know, Dave, for much of my career, I was a radio newscaster.
Right.
First 20 years or so of my career, WXRT, WNUA, bringing people news every day. And a newscaster's job is really to look at what's going on in the world and boil it down and say, these are the 5, 10, 15 things that I think you should know about right now.
Sure, working within the time constraints.
Within the time, very, very tight time constraints for traditional radio news. And then for the second half of my career, or the second third of my career anyway, I spent with the Chicago Tribune, figuring out what breaking news was going to look like on the internet. And I helped create what became the Tribune's email news strategy.
Okay.
So around the time that Donald, and I loved all that, newscasting on the radio, in essence newscasting by email. And when Donald Trump became president, I had a flood of friends and acquaintances who came to me and said, there's too much news.
There's a lot of
I
news
can't
now.
deal with it.
Right.
Do you know anyone, and a friend of mine actually, someone I'd known since she was in high school and I was a professional, said, do you know anyone who's doing kind of a roundup of news to know? And I thought to myself, well, I have some time on my hands, and that happens to be something that I know how to do.
For sure.
So maybe I should follow my own advice and do what it is that I like to do, which is deliver the news to people.
Right.
So with a little time on my hands and for virtually no money, I created ChicagoPublicSquare.com. Started it as a blog on Blogger, which is Google's creaky but still functional blogging platform, free. Registered the domain, which I didn't have to do. It could have been ChicagoPublicSquare.blogger.com, kind of clunky, but turns out for I think $12 a year, I could rent the domain ChicagoPublicSquare.com. A little more elegant. So $12 a year, I could afford it.
That's right. We'll talk about your revenue model later.
Revenue model, no. And then one of the things that I decided to do, because one of my favorite quotes comes from Leonardo da Vinci, a work of art is never completed, it's only abandoned. Because on the internet, and this is one of the things I learned when I went from analog media, radio, to the internet, one of the hardest things with digital media is stopping. When you're working on the internet, one of the hardest things is deciding when something is done.
Right.
Because you can always go back in. I can tweak the wording, I can fix the spelling, I can augment that with a graphic or a video or an audio, I can do a podcast. But I decided the best way to avoid that trap was to give myself a hard deadline every day. 10 o'clock I decided each morning. So at 10 o'clock, MailChimp, which is a free email, well, for beginners, it's a free email service.
It's a premium version.
It's a premium version, which I've now gotten into. But at least at the beginning, it's a fairly generous model. You can send a few thousand emails a month. So I decided that at 10 o'clock each morning, MailChimp would come in and scrape my website, take what it finds, and email it out to people. Okay. I happen to think that email is a largely undervalued medium, and it's a great way to communicate with people. Among other things, it's free of the algorithms of Facebook and Twitter. You're not at the mercy of whatever tweaks to their logic they choose to apply.
Sure, the reader decides what they're going to see.
Email is a direct connection to people who have given you their email address, which is kind of a personal thing. You know, they've said, "I'm willing to get email from you. Here, send me stuff." So email, I think, is a really great channel for communication. And even though Chicago Public Square is a website, and I encourage everyone to visit it,
No, they will.
The real product is the daily email.
Okay.
Because I believe it's the best way, and it's proven over the last almost 2 years now. The most reliable way to reach a large number of people. Website, you're kind of at the mercy of people remembering to go to the website, even if it's a bookmark at the top of the browser. We all have dozens of those, so you're competing against all of those. The nice thing about email that I found over the years is whenever anybody tells you about email, "Oh, I don't use email anymore." Not true. Everybody checks email.
Right.
And everybody, unlike Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, when people open their email, they look at the most recent thing and they look at everything else all the way down to the last time they open their email. So everything
when it starts to become work instead of play.
That's
kind of when I walk away.
Yeah.
As well.
So everyone sees the email you send, unless you are unfortunate enough to wind up in their spam bucket. So your email will be seen, and it's a reliable way to reach people. So Chicago Public Square, the short answer to your question, is a daily email news briefing that, yes, touches on national matters, Donald Trump, to go back to the original concept, but also news relevant to Chicago. And because what happens in Washington does affect Chicago, there's a good dose of national and world news through the filter of, is this relevant to Chicago? And by virtue of that, much of what happens in Washington is relevant to Chicago.
Well, so let me ask the big question then. If at some point in the future, suppose Donald Trump isn't the president anymore, what we have to talk about?
Oh, and Chicago Public Square does it. I mean, I am historically in my career a Chicago newscaster. Right. Here is and if you listen to a radio newscast, sometimes it'll begin with national news, sometimes it'll begin with local news, whatever is the most interesting, most relevant thing. Right. We live in a time when often what happens in Washington is the most interesting thing, and Donald Trump was the impetus for this project, but it is a news briefing for Chicago. I call Chicago Public Square Chicago's new front page.
Very cool, very cool.
So as I was saying, I call this, Chicago's new front page, and it is, as I envision it, yes, an email, but it's also what if I were the leader of a news organization, I would think that my front page of my website should look like. It happens that Chicago Public Square points to a lot of content from a lot of different places. Someone referred to Chicago Public Square as my news ministry. Actually, it's a minister friend of mine said he called Chicago Public Square my news ministry.
Very interesting perspective. Would you have called it something like that?
Yeah, and another friend called it, and I have called it this. Charlie reads the news, so I don't have to.
There you go.
So,
so it's not just curating; it's guiding, it's leading.
Yes.
So who would you say your readers are? Do you have a good feel for that? Or?
I have a reasonably good feel, although by definition, the content is a filter of the audience. Mm-hmm. There are very few people who are going to read this who are not interested in Chicago or news relevant to Chicago or news that would be on Chicago's front page. There's no reason for anybody to give me that email address.
Right.
Except for a few occasionally curious people in the media who want to study what I'm doing.
That's a good point too. So that's another potential, maybe smaller branch of who your audience is.
Yeah. But MailChimp provides some geographical data.
Okay.
And they're all, it doesn't get too granular, but they're all within the United States, the continental United States, or Alaska or Hawaii.
Okay.
And like less than 10 in Europe and other parts of the world.
Okay, so. A few people, but I'm guessing mostly concentrated in kind of a radius around the city.
Yes, again, it's my history and my reputation, and anyone who knows my reputation who's interested in following this knows me as a newscaster who brings news of interest to the Chicago area on the radio or on the internet. In my time as news director at WGN, which is a regional radio station.
Sure, that goes well beyond. I think you've really helped us out by describing the product. The product is you, in a sense, if I understand what you're saying correctly.
It is, but in the long run, I assuming there is a long run, mm-hmm. and part of that will depend on how much your class can help me here. It's a marker. It's a beachhead mm-hmm. for what if it goes on, it needs to, as with any organization, any creation, it needs to grow or it will wither.
Right.
So Chicago Public Square is, in a sense, as I've said, me going through the motions of saying, if someone were to pay me to do something, mm-hmm. this is what it would look like. And in fact, the Chicago Tribune paid me to do something very much like this mm-hmm. when I was there. So right now it is me, but it is me pointing to the work of people I respect, to news coverage and analysis that I think that my readers should know about. And it could just as easily be content that is created under the auspices of Chicago Public Square as it is pointing to work created by the Chicago Tribune or the Sun-Times or the Chicago Reader or Block Club Chicago or Politico or the Washington Post or the New York Times. I could go on and on. It's interchangeable. One of the philosophies I developed at the Chicago Tribune, and I'll take credit for it being known as the Miracle on 34th Street strategy. And if you know the movie, The Miracle on 34th Street, you know Santa Claus, the real Santa Claus, gets hired at Macy's mm-hmm. as they think, make-believe Santa Claus. And at one point he sends a lady who's looking for, I think it's skates, from Macy's to the competing store, Gimbel's, and says, go to Gimbel's, you'll find a much better product there. And Santa Claus gets called on the carpet for, how dare you send our customers somewhere else? Mm. And shortly thereafter, this lady comes back in and says, I want to thank you so much for sending me to Gimbel's. I got what I needed. My kid's going to be happy. I'm going to start all my shopping now at Macy's, even though Macy's sent me somewhere else. Right. Now, this is a philosophy that Amazon, for instance, has embraced. You go to Amazon.com and you can buy from Amazon, or you can buy from other vendors who Amazon will tell you about. Right. As a consequence, Amazon has become the starting point for
that's right.
many people who do their shopping, whether they wind up buying at Amazon or not. I think news media need to embrace that same concept. Whether it's our story or not, if there's something you should know about, we'll tell you about it. When I was at the Tribune, I fought for and won the right to use the Tribune's daily email to point to Chicago Sun-Times coverage.
Right. The other guys.
And as a consequence, we received letters of surprise and gratitude from readers. Really?
Right.
Much like the lady in Macy's. I'm going to start all my reading at the Chicago Tribune. Now, when I left the company, they stopped doing that. But I still think it is a fine strategy. It's embraced by other news organizations, too, that now widely will point to or link to, that CNN will link to the New York Times, the New York Times will link to CNN if they have something that the organization can't do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost a I guess for lack of a better word, a meta-competitive strategy,
Yeah.
right? The willingness to say that today I can't solve your problem. If I continue to try, you will be unhappy, and that will hurt our relationship more than the sum of me sending you away, but you coming back happy could.
And so the beauty, if there is any beauty to be seen in Chicago Public Square, I think, is that it is the Switzerland of Chicago news organizations. Neutral ground.
Beautiful mountains.
Come here, yeah, no good mountains in Chicago Public Square, but come here and we'll tell you what you need and send you where we think you should go, whether it is something Chicago Public Square created, and Chicago Public Square can create things, or somewhere else. Right now, because it's a startup, we're sending people elsewhere.
Yeah.
But as resources grow, financial resources, I would love to do, among other things, when I take off, when I go on vacation, Chicago Public Square stops. Right. I would love to have enough revenue to hire people to continue to do it on my days off. I would like to have revenue to commission people to do certain things. If you write this essay, or you'll investigate this for us and write this story, I will pay you something. Okay. Not there yet. We'll get to talking about the revenue I have now eventually, but right now, Chicago Public Square, based on the revenue I have, is it's almost a minimum wage job for me.
For you, right.
When we get past that point, then it is a thing that can grow and can take on any mission, really, with enough revenue. Any organization can do that.
Of course. And you've already started to spell out what you see as not even necessarily a next step, but almost what is the ideal look of Chicago Public Square. Could you talk more about that in other ways? What do you hope this becomes when all's, well, again, Da Vinci quote, right? It'll never be all.
That's right. It'll never be done. It'll only be abandoned.
Have you allowed yourself to think back? At one point I wanted to take a step back and say, yeah, look what I made.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure that we'll make it there, but again, with your help, class, it's possible. It can become, just as many of the biggest media companies in existence now, Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Tribune, the Sun-Times, started very humbly with, staffs in the single digits or double digits, and they have grown to become behemoths. It's entirely possible that this could be a news organization unto itself, or merge with another news organization, or acquire. These are obviously grandiose thoughts that are so far ahead that I don't consider them part of my day-to-day.
But they enter your mind.
But it's possible, and Chicago Public Square is, as much as anything, a demonstration project for others. You can do this in your field too, whether it's journalism, whether it's marketing strategy, whether it's the environment or sports coverage, whatever. What I'm doing is virtually nothing that anyone else can't do.
Right. The resources are there.
And if it grows, it can become virtually anything. Really, it's a question of revenue and audience. Okay. And for me, audience comes first. Revenue follows.
Talk about your audience, and you've mentioned a little bit that you're working with MailChimp, and so you've got a mailing list.
Yeah.
Where does growing that audience fit into your plans? Is that just something that you hope happens organically, just through continuing to do what you love, or have you tried other marketing approaches in the past?
Here are the main ways it has grown. And by the way, this is also my advice for anybody starting any kind of media organization. Step one, get a lot of friends in digital media. Facebook, Twitter, that helps. Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. So when I launched, the first thing I did was actually before I launched, over the course of a decade, I have been what my family would characterize as promiscuous in requesting and accepting friends on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter.
That's right. I have, like that, a very open door policy, figuring my life will be better by having more connections than by having fewer.
I think it's so that obviously in this day and age there are a lot of political and privacy questions, but because Facebook in particular came along at a time when I was used to working in the media, I kind of always treated Facebook as a publishing platform.